Welcome to the Real Estate Prosperity Podcast. My name is Robert Metz. I'm the author of the just published book entitled Real Estate Prosperity, which is presently available in both e-form and hard copy at www.realestateprosperityllc.com. This is the fourth in a series of podcasts which basically discuss the approximately 28 methods of financing or controlling the deal. Controlling, financing your purchase, whether it's of a property in foreclosure or some other type of transaction. A bank-owned property, your traditional multiple listed property, or anything in the world. Now, in our third podcast, I was discussing some of the 10 methods of conventional financing where the contract has or does not have a mortgage contingency clause. We had just discussed the balloon method, now the graduated type mortgage. The graduated mortgage, similar to but different than the balloon, is designed to permit the lender some flexibility in terms of loaning you money for maybe a full 30, 35-year term and not being obligated to keeping the interest rate at the identical terms. Again, the markets vary and they come and go. So at best, it's always a crapshoot, both for the lender and sometimes for the borrower. Who knows where the market's going to go? There's always big changes. But there, at certain times, lenders are more reluctant than at others to loan money for a longer period at a fixed rate, especially when interest rates in the present and the near term are low. In the graduated, you might have a 30-year mortgage with interest increments at fixed increases every 5 years, every 10 years. There's no rule, there's no absolute. It's simply a general method by which the mortgage can be structured to permit flexibility that the lender can increase the interest rate periodically. Now, obviously, if the market does not command it, if the lender has the ability to increase your rate 2.5 or 3 points after 5 or 8 years, according to the mortgage terms, and if interest rates have gone down in the meantime or stayed constant, obviously if the lender wants to keep your mortgage, he will either renegotiate it or maybe negotiate it back down, or you can go someplace else and get a new mortgage. So again, it could be a fluid situation, but a basic graduated mortgage has interest increments, not pegged to any index, not pegged to anything in the present world as time goes on, but simply graduated increments based on a predetermined formula or amount. And again, depending on circumstances, it can be subject to revision if both parties agree. And again, the lender will typically have an incentive to negotiate a graduated mortgage down if the market has not gone in the lender's favor, and the lender can simply not command that kind of a rate at a future point in time. Now, in a similar vein but different is the adjustable rate mortgage. Again, 30, 35 years, whatever the term may be, whereby the interest can rise according to a certain formula, a certain index, a certain percentage formula pegged to an index from time to time over a period of time at given intervals. The mortgage interest can be recalculated as the matter goes forward. And again, if interest rates go down, well then it does not hurt either party. If interest rates are going up, the lender has protected himself by being able to get an extra higher interest rate. Despite the risks, and again we're talking here from the borrower's point of view, despite the risks of being exposed to potentially higher interest rates over the term of the mortgage, if that's the industry, that's the cost of doing business. If you have a good deal on a foreclosure property or a non-foreclosure property, if you intend to hold for the longer term or the shorter term, everything has to be built into the mix. There are going to be variables, there are going to be issues. And if the market commands that you adjust yourself to possibly higher interest rates in the future, so be it. If you're renting the property out, surely you'll be getting or hope to be getting a higher yield. If you're flipping the property, it doesn't matter. If interest rates are substantially higher, that's the market. Anything you do will be higher interest rates. If interest rates do not increase, it doesn't matter again. There are also types of conventional mortgages which are interest only, where it's not any kind of direct reduction. There's no payment of principal as time goes by. It's simply a flat rate of interest, whether it's an adjusted rate or whether it's a fixed rate of interest only. At the end of whatever the term of your mortgage is, you owe whatever you borrowed to begin with. Are there pros and cons? Obviously. Many times an interest-only mortgage can help the investor or speculator because the investor or speculator is not so much interested in paying off the principal so quickly on the mortgage, and he's not going to pay that much initially to begin with, but he's interested in just getting the financing to do his deal, to maximize the potential of the property, to control it until he can flip it, to control the property until he can rent it out and maybe refinance it, maybe pull more equity out through a new mortgage, maybe rehab it, maybe subdivide it, maybe redevelop it. So an interest-only mortgage can sometimes be attractive in given markets to the lender, and it can always be attractive to a buyer who is a flipping type of buyer or who is simply a speculator or an investor. Now, in recent years, we have what you call the no verification, the no doc loans, no documentation. Depending on the market, these come in or out of favor, and again, that relates to whether it's a tight money supply or a free money supply in a very loose market where money is flowing readily. In a no verification or a no doc situation, it's excellent for a strong buyer or a low down payment buyer. You have your government mortgages, FHA, Federal Housing Administration, administered by HUD, and VA, Veterans Administration. In my earlier podcast where we dealt with assumable mortgages, I mentioned VA and FHA mortgages because by law they are very assumable on the face of them. No consent required, perfunctory paperwork, minimal fees. Makes them very attractive mortgages where you have a mortgage that your buyer can assume even if he's not qualified. FHA mortgage, many years ago, was regarded as kind of the urban mortgage. Some decades back, a couple of decades ago, it quickly became the suburban mortgage. Long viewed as a tough mortgage because of the administrative paperwork, FHA mortgage in tough financing times became very attractive despite its tougher paperwork. The government paperwork requirements became more and more streamlined, but the FHA mortgage, by virtue of being assumable, typically at a lower, more competitive interest rate, and more available in tough mortgage times, with tight money times, became very desirable, and increasingly over the last years you find many houses in suburban areas, maybe higher priced houses, with FHA mortgages, whereas some years back you would never find an FHA mortgage in suburbia. The FHA mortgages also include what's called a 203K program and other investor speculator programs whereby the investor can attractively mortgage multifamily property and spec property that he may be doing renovations on. That's where the 203K program comes in. And there's a variety of programs and a variety of subcompartments of these programs for the investor occupant, for the absentee investor. Bottom line is FHA for the fixed mortgage for your traditional one-family or two-family owner-occupant is a very attractive and desirable vehicle for financing, and for the speculator investor in multifamilies and doing renovations or complete rehabs, similarly it's become a very attractive program and very much in demand, as I discuss in my book, Real Estate Prosperity. VA mortgages, Veterans Administration, is reserved for veterans who have done certain service, but like FHA mortgages, anybody can assume a VA mortgage, even a non-veteran. Typically, VA mortgages have more lenient qualifying criteria in consideration of the veteran status, which again, if the veteran is going to permit somebody to assume his mortgage, gets passed on to the borrower who is assuming. VA mortgages will typically carry with them stringent inspection requirements, the theory being that the government is trying to protect the veteran and not have him get into a mortgage, into a property that's in poor repair. So somebody who's looking to buy a VA property, a property with a VA mortgage on it already, or indeed to assume that VA mortgage, unless the present veteran seller, owner, has really ignored the property and let it deteriorate, unless he's done damage to it, in the near term, after closing, typical VA mortgage properties will be in pretty good shape, and that's a good consideration for any borrower, any borrower. Now, another form, and put it under an umbrella, of financing is SBA, Small Business Administration, whose loans apply to both real estate and non-real estate, inventory, etc. It's for small businesses, and it can be a mortgage that involves real estate purchase and or just inventory or other assets of a going business, retail, manufacturing, etc. So this category of mortgages, SBA programs and related type programs, can be an innovative and a very valuable area to be familiar with. These mortgages are available on various levels. They can either be government subsidized or not. Government subsidized meaning by federal, state, or other levels of government, or quasi-government agencies or programs that are set up. They can be nationwide in scope, or they can be regional, because some of them are simply state. Some of them are simply in urban enterprise zones within a state, within a city. These mortgage programs can be ongoing or periodic. The SBA is an ongoing mortgage program. Some of the other SBA type programs, whether again they're given by state jurisdictions or the federal government, come and go, and some of them are more permanent programs also. And again, these programs can be for residential and or commercial properties. Third-party secondary financing, meaning third party, not your seller, doing the financing. Secondary, meaning a second mortgage, is an extremely valuable tool. In recent years, second mortgages have become a little more difficult to come by just due to the nature of the mortgage market and the interest rates. But oftentimes, third-party secondary financing in situations where the borrower does not have enough money, the new borrower does not, and where his seller is not in a position to offer seller financing, to offer a take-back of a second mortgage or a first mortgage, third-party secondary financing can often bridge the gap between what you can borrow and what you have to pay for the property and enable you to make the deal.